Down to business.
When he drinks, he thinks.
That's the nectar of the gods, baby.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the #1 liquid-fueled, liquid lubricated show on the interwebs. This is the Whiskey Musings Broadcast, and I am your absolutely not fully up on all sports host, Rick. Well, let me explain a little bit as to why I say I'm not up on all sports. Okay, first of all, as we know, wokeness has invaded all sports. I say all because for a long, long time, I felt that the NHL might just hold out on being woke. Well, a story popped today that has literally taken that completely out of the equation. And I have a special guest tonight. In fact, I am so excited that he is here to talk with you and to talk with me about this particular subject because of the fact that I literally called him, I would say about 3.5 hours ago. And this guy is an incredibly busy man, but he has given up some time to come here on the show with me tonight. And I'm going to get to him in just a second, okay? But I have a couple things to start off with first. Number one, obviously, because this is the Whiskey Musings Broadcast, I need to explain to you what I'm drinking. And tonight I've slipped back to the Four Roses single barrel Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey. And as you can see, I am getting low. So you know what? Bonnie and Fat Paws, your husband, if he is on the line, I can tell you that I'm going to finish this bottle and probably go get another one. So let me go ahead and wet my whistle here. I like that. That is good stuff. That is good stuff. And thank you for the reference. Don't worry. I still have the Crown Royal Black, but it's going to hang. It's going to hang as a special event kind of thing, because that is just a really nice gesture that I got from one of my whiskey warriors, Buddy Weiser, of course. Now, tonight's sponsor is, of course, my favorite thing in the world. And the reason why it's my favorite thing in the world is because I am co-owner in it. Tonight's sponsor is TGRN, True Grit Roots Network. And I knew this would happen. I'm sorry, guys. Look, I knew that the minute that I put it up here, I went, you know what? It's going to fall into the background because of my background. Anyway, True Grit Roots Network, TGRN, champions independent artists while paying respect to the pioneers who shaped modern roots music, featuring outlaw country, blues, and rock with a unique twist of urban that is carefully selected and purposely put together. We are the radio highway that connects the back roads, highways, and city streets to your favorite dance hall, roadhouse, and juke joint. TGRN provides original, exclusive programming and interviews that are produced and hosted by our own team of DJs, hosts, and personalities. Find us on the web at tgrn.net, to download our app in the App Store and from Google Play. Alternatively, you can find us in the Live 365 catalog of internet digital radio stations and through the Live 365 app as well. You can also play our station on your Amazon Alexa by saying, "Play True Grit Roots Network from Live 365. Be sure to use the word "from" in the command, "Play True Grit Roots Network from Live 365. Breaking boundaries for authentic roots radio. True Grit Roots Network, tgrn.net, Austin, Texas. And like I said, that is my my partner's internet radio station, where we try to focus on American style of music, blues, country, rock, things that generated here. Do me a favor, take a listen. We're getting ready to launch some new programming, and it's great. It's great. I love it, obviously. So Just because I love it, you got to love it too, damn it. All right. Now, next thing, obviously, this is October, the month of October, and until the Halloween broadcast, I have spooky Halloween backgrounds. Let me get out of the way so you can see this one. And that is my spooky Halloween background for tonight. And of course, that is going to go all the way until Halloween night, or my Halloween broadcast, on Saturday. I also have a special guest coming on November 2nd. He finally kind of announced it to the stream, so I feel like I can actually get it. I think I've announced it too, but the Mark K from The Mark K Show, the radio host out of Jacksonville, Florida, who I listen to pretty much just about every weekday on Rumble from noon till 3 p.m. Eastern, is coming here to the Whiskey Musings broadcast for an interview with me directly. And that is going to be absolutely awesome. You're going to have to tune in for that. That's going to be a Wednesday night. It's in, I believe, 2 weeks from tonight. 2 weeks from tonight. And hey, I see, this is awesome. I actually see Jay, the board operator and producer extraordinaire from the Mark K Show, in on the chat. That is awesome. I am stoked as well for Mark to come on the show. I've been trying and trying and trying. He believes that I didn't ask him first, but he is wrong. I did ask him first. And then, of course, I got Hannah and Jay to come on. Not that they're second best to Mark, because they're not. I love both of them. They are fabulous for coming on the show and talking with me and everything. And so Mark's just he's just going to round out the trifecta. That's the best for last. So that is awesome. Okay. So tonight's conversation I want to bring up is a article that popped in the Washington Examiner, or at least I saw it in the Washington Examiner. I also had an article, or saw an article as well, that linked to the AP News that is talking about, oh, wow, you're not Jay. So, okay, well, he's not Jay. That is actually Mark. Mark himself is in the chat, folks. This is awesome. Thank you, Mark, by the way. I appreciate the donation there, the Rumble rant. I am so excited about you coming. And thank you. Welcome to the program, by the way. Welcome to showing up in the chat. This is awesome. All right. So the NHL. This article popped and it caught my eye. It really did. Because of the fact that, again, in the sports world, I mean, we've had, the NHL, or not the NHL, sorry, the NFL, the NBA, even NASCAR has been brought in and permeated with essentially wokeness and things like racism and some of the things that the liberal leftist loonies, let's just say, are all trying to get everyone else to jump on board with. I mean, CRT in our schools and all these other things, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I honestly felt that the NHL, being what it is, would probably not go down that path. However, what we ended up with is this article that popped today. And let me bring that up here. The NHL wants to stop hiring white people. Now, in order to gain a pretty good perspective on this, I mean, I understand the more of the political aspect to it, but in order to gain a really good perspective on this, what I wanted to do was bring in a person that I know who is somewhat of an expert in this field. I mean, he's played the game. He comes from the Northeast and has done such a wonderful job. He also has his own podcast that he just recently launched called the Hockey Free for All podcast. And I'm going to let him tell you about this. But check it out. It is on Spotify. I know that for sure. And I know that he publishes it through Podbean. So you're probably going to have to get it through Podbean if you can't find it elsewhere. But anyway, so Hockey Free for All, the man, the myth, the legend. His name is Steve Stiles. And so Steve, I've got Steve on the phone. Steve, welcome to the program.
Hey, Rick, thank you so much for allowing me to be part of your show tonight.
Oh, it is so awesome. I am so glad that you were able to take a little bit of time. I know you're a very busy person, so I thank you for taking a little bit of time and coming on to the show. So let me ask you this. First of all, let's kind of dispense with some of the preliminary stuff. Why don't you give us a quick overview of what your podcast is about?
So on our podcast, we cover trades, we cover all kinds of player acquisitions, how players are doing, especially with rookies as well as veterans on the teams. And we talk about their skill sets. We compare how they're doing, how their growth and development is, and just really get into the players themselves. There's not a lot of podcasts that do that. So many other podcasts want to talk about either something that's either pessimistic, optimistic, negative, or positive. We try to really focus on the players and give them the attention that the players deserve.
Excellent. And so give us a little bit of your background in terms of, I know you have been in hockey pretty much all your life. So go ahead and just give us a quick rundown on that.
Well, I was one of those kids that grew up in the northeastern corner of the U.S., and a lot of those kids, like myself, we learned how to skate before we learned how to walk. It was just kind of almost in the blood, if you will, being in that part of the country. You have just tremendous hockey influences, not only from Canada, which is fairly close by, but you have Boston University, Northeastern, New Hampshire University. I mean, it's just kind of like a hockey central. It's embedded in the area, so you can't help but get caught up with it. So I literally started skating before I learned how to walk. I played goalie for 19 years, and I absolutely love the sport. There's really nothing else like that sport.
Nothing else like hockey. All right. So let me ask you this. Just from playing in hockey and everything else, I sent you these articles in preparation for this. And literally, I'm telling you, this was like a 2-hour deal just 2 hours ago. So you've had a chance to kind of look through the articles and everything else. Why don't you go ahead and just kind of give me your thoughts on the information that's being presented, apparently by the NHL about this?
Sure. But just before I get into that, just for anybody out there that has an interest in that sport, if you truly want an inside, unique perspective about that, there's a book that I'd recommend to anybody who wants to know that, called The Game by Ken Dryden. It truly will captivate you from the moment you open the first page. He played for the Montreal Canadiens, won 6 Stanley Cups, and he just gives it to you from a player perspective, which unless a player does, you just can't get that same kind of view. So with that said, yeah, the topics are unbelievably interesting. It's hard to believe how much is trying to be made to just cause more chaos. And that's really the main cause of this. I mean, for example, if 84% of the NHL being white is a bad thing, when do the articles start popping out that 73% of the NBA being black is a bad thing? I mean, is there going to be an equal showing of, if 84% of the NHL being white is bad, is 73% of the NBA being black bad? Is there going to be an article that says, well, we have to stop hiring black people because we need more white people to balance out our sport? That is just a perspective of insanity. Those articles that you sent me were just absolutely fascinating and also frustrating, because a lot of sports, especially the NHL, has done so much to get into communities with Native Americans and with various races, Asian communities throughout Alaska, throughout Inuit properties in Canada and things like that. and they've tried to make an incredible difference. As an example, just this year, the Montreal Canadiens invited many people of the Inuit nations who coach their youth hockey players to their professional hockey camp for that very reason of diversity, for that very reason to show that everybody has an opportunity. But see, therein lies the problem. Articles like this are causing people to think of things like, well, your race, your gender, your sexual orientation somehow matters. It doesn't. What really matters is skills, ability. That's what you have to have, and talent and tenaciousness. If you want to do it, you can. Your gender, your age, whatever your upbringing are, if you're that committed to what you're going to do, that's what sports and everybody else, including employers and corporate America, at least should be looking at. Hopefully they are, because one of the biggest problems in America, people seem to fundamentally, and this ties into, I know your show is more traditionally about politics, everybody seems infuriated and concerned about how the U.S. can't compete on an even playing field worldwide. This is one of the reasons that it can't.
Right.
The right issues are not being looked at. We're not looking at skill set, talent, and ability. We're concerned with issues that, what I say, are not important. No, I wouldn't call them not important, but are of a secondary scope compared to the primary talent that the marketplace can't find that it needs.
Yep. And just to kind of bring you back, you had mentioned a percentage. I'm now showing the demographics, the racial demographics that the NHL's report, which is linked in the show notes. You can go into the description in the videos, and you'll be able to download this PDF directly from the NHL. And the demographics that they're showing is that based on their research in this, you have across the NHL and its clubs, employees identify, these are the employees identify as 83.6% white, 4.17% Asian, 3.74% black, 3.71 Hispanic Latino, less than half, or actually, sorry, 0.5% at indigenous, whatever they mean by that. And then, of course, they have this other category of 1.81, and then apparently almost 2.5% preferred not to answer. Now, that's just for the employees. But they're not only just looking at the NHL itself isn't looking at just the employees. They're also looking at their internship programs, which is the upper one that's right here in the upper stop. I can't go too far because otherwise my hand goes off the screen. But upper side on this right side here, it talks about in their internship and fellowship programs. We're talking about white identifying in 65.44%. Black being almost 14% at 3.9 or 13.97, Asian at 11.76%, Hispanic Latino at just under 6 at 5.88, other and everything else in there, and they're identifying. The one thing that I find interesting is the fact that for whatever reason, the left really, really likes to break you down into groups, and they appreciate, I won't say appreciate, but they want to separate you into groups. They make this as more of an identity, and they're really into identity politics. And I'm a little sad, to be honest with you, that it's dropped into the NHL on this. But realistically, I mean, looking at the NHL, can you kind of go, hockey in general started off as a Canadian sport, did it not?
It did, absolutely. And predominantly is also an upper Midwest in the U.S. Sport as well, although in recent traditional years, you had expansion into Dallas, North Carolina, Tampa, Florida, and southern states and things like that. But it's still predominantly a cold weather sport.
So given the fact that it's a cold weather sport and generally predominated by the Northern American area, and I mean, let's face it, even Nordic countries like Russia, Scandinavia, Sweden, they all have hockey teams. So it is spread throughout the world, but it's usually the ones that are interested in playing the sport or participating in the sport itself is in the northern kind of territories. Is that, am I off on that?
No, absolutely. You're very accurate with that. And it's funny. I have friends that cut across all different cultures and races. And all of them, as much as political parties have tried to separate everybody and caused dissension between people, there are people that enjoy living in the South. There are people that enjoy living in warmer temperatures. There's other people that enjoy living in places like Fargo, North Dakota, or Regina, Saskatchewan, that would never coexist in each other's world. And predominantly, African Americans love living in warm climates. They want nothing to do with the cold. Traditionally, white people have migrated to Scandinavian countries, Minnesota, Massachusetts, North Dakota. Nobody will ever confuse those with tropical environments.
So one of the things that I saw that was very interesting in both these articles, and I'd be interested to get your feedback, is they even mentioned that there are, I guess there are African American or Black. There's a coach that just got hired that was, the first one in the league, and they sort of, I guess, in the thought mindset of the left, they kind of broke the barrier for it. Are there other coaches that are other ethnic backgrounds?
Yeah, actually, Ted Nolan is Native American. He was a coach of the New York Islanders and Buffalo Sabres for a long time, and it's interesting. He's dealing with this from a Native American Inuit culture related issue. One of the big hires, and that's something I was going to get into for everybody that's going to say, oh, well, yeah, absolutely, the NHL is far too white. Well, this year they hired Mike Greer as general manager of the San Jose Sharks in California and is doing a fantastic job. His brother, ironically, is the general manager of the Miami Dolphins in the NFL. You have lots of players that have been drafted and have played in the NHL. I could go back as far as like the 50s and 60s to Willie O'Ree, but I don't think anybody would want to go back that far. So in keeping it current, you have players such as PK Subban that have played for the Canadiens, Nashville and New Jersey franchises. You have Jordan Harris, who has been drafted by and plays for the Montreal Canadiens, who also have Jason Struble, is finishing up his senior year at Northeastern University. Again, one of those cold climates you talked about in Massachusetts. He'll be competing for a spot next year in Montreal. And the list goes on quite a bit. And if you would indulge me for just a moment, I certainly won't read the entire list. So for anybody that thinks, oh my God, there's no black people in the NHL, you have Madison Bowie in Montreal, Quentin Byfield with the LA Kings, Anthony Duclair is in Florida, Jalen Chatfield is in Carolina, Evander Kane and Darnell Nurse are in Edmonton, Keandre Miller is with the New York Rangers, Devontae Smith-Pelly is with the Washington Capitals, and Malcolm Subban is with the Buffalo Sabres. And that's not the entire list. There's many, many other players. So there has been, for about 10 to 15 years now, quite an increase in the amount of black NHL players. And the NHL welcomes with open arms anybody. I'll give you another example. Scott Gomez was originally, his entire family, here's an interesting move, moved from the country of Mexico to Alaska. Now, if you talk about a cultural and environmental change, I'm not sure it can get much more dramatic than that. He and his whole family obviously is Hispanic, and he played for over a decade and a half with the Devils and the Montreal Canadiens. So the NHL has always welcomed everybody with open arms. If you can play, if you have the skills that a team needs, you're there. You have made the roster, because they are always, like everybody else, looking for the right person for the right job.
So one of the things, one of the quotes that was in here, apparently, let's see, I'm trying to find, this is in the AP article and I'm trying to find it. The paragraph is just under the graphic, and let me go ahead and pop this up. So it's right here, and it's talking about Minnesota's Matt Dumba, I think is how it's pronounced. Said he recently still sees racism in hockey, and had added that he's sick of the old boys club and them dictating who is and who isn't welcome. And I guess he and Davis spoke last week about the topic, and he follows on and says, we talked about how there may be different ways of thinking about this work, but at the end of the day, we are all in service of the same outcome, and that is to grow the sport and to make sure that folks that look like him and me feel comfortable and welcomed in this sport, said Davis, who is black. We both agreed that that was the goal. Let me ask you this. I mean, you keep your eyes and fingers on the pulse. Have you seen articles or heard through the grapevine of things like, and I'm just going to use it as an example, like, you know, Bubba Wallace had an incident. He's a NASCAR driver who happens to be black. Had an incident a while ago where they had the FBI come out and investigate essentially a garage door pull that was tied up in what appeared to be by somebody that it appeared to be a noose. Have you ever heard of anything like that happening in hockey? I mean, again, I don't really watch hockey, so I'm kind of leaning on you a little bit to know whether or not this stuff has happened. Have you ever heard of things like that?
Never heard of things like with nooses and things like that. There's been some reports of in between periods or during shifts on the ice of racial slurs that have been spoken or yelled at other players, but it's not just with black players. It covers a gamut of different ethnic backgrounds and things like that. And in my opinion, I think that's on the organizations to better educate and work with their personnel within the organization, regardless of whether they're players on the ice, they're in administration positions, or whatever they are. That's up to the organization to create a non-hostile work environment. But that shouldn't be taken to the extreme of, well, now we can't hire this kind of person or that gender or this gender. That doesn't solve the problem. There's, unfortunately, on a number of different things, and this is just the latest, there's been this let's sweep it under the rug by doing this mentality that never fixes problems. It just makes them go away temporarily, only to come back with a greater vengeance later.
So let me ask you this. I mean, you know, you keep an eye on a lot of these coaches. And there was that big NFL dust up over a coach that might have said something that was inappropriately. I don't remember the exact quote. But have you heard of any other little dust ups like that within either the NHL or even some of the lower leagues?
Not on the hockey front, I haven't. The big issue this summer, of course, was with Brian Flores, who used to be the coach of the Miami Dolphins and now is currently on Pittsburgh's staff for the Steelers. And there was all kinds of unfair or fair labor hiring and inequality as far as the number of black head coaches and things like that. I think what gets lost in a lot of this, and the NHL and the NFL, ironically, both have 32 teams. There's only 32 jobs. There's only 32 people in the world that do what these people do. Mm-hmm. And there's not a statistic as to, if you remember a long time ago, how they used to say about policemen, it's like, you had no chance to be hired if you weren't 6'2", 240 pounds, and didn't have a certain build. Nobody's going into interviews with that kind of criteria. They're hiring people that they're comfortable with, that they can believe can get the best out of their personnel, whoever that person is. There really isn't any of that, and shouldn't be any of that criteria otherwise, because especially in sports, just like most companies want to turn a profit, sports teams want to win. They want to be at the top of their sport for as long as humanly possible.
Right. Now, I know that your forte is mostly in the hockey world, of course, because of your podcast and that, and your love for the sport. But I also know that you kind of keep a pulse on some of the other sports that are out there as well. And you made an interesting comment at the beginning when I first brought you on, which was talking about if the NHL is racist in the fact that it's mostly white, then the NBA could be considered racist because it's mostly black. Do you have any like sense or feeling? Can you think about or at least articulate with us anything that deals with the NBA and maybe what potentially there might be some percentages there. Do you have any idea in terms of that?
That I don't. I don't follow the NBA as closely as other sports, but the NBA has done a phenomenal marketing job of their players. The NBA, like the NFL, has seen just an incredible salary increase. So, how badly is everybody being treated?
Right.
I mean, there's nothing else that these people could do, and there's probably a fair amount of jealous people that have either gone the college way and that hasn't turned out the way that they have, or have gone a different way expecting a greater payoff. There's not a lot of professions that, like these athletes in all these sports, whether it's the NFL, Major League Baseball, the NHL, whoever it is, has a revenue source to be earned that few other places and companies will.
You know, and that actually brings up a good point. And you and I have actually had conversations about this because we've known each other for quite some time. But you and I have had conversations about this in the past where, you know, a lot of these players, and I'm going to kind of pull out because my favorite sport used to be the sport of soccer. And I say used to be because I don't watch it anymore. Once again, I'm just sort of against anything that's woke in sports. I actually use sports. I posted this on Twitter today that I actually use sports as an escape from all of the other things that are going on in the world. I don't want to see a whole bunch of politics or anything like that. I just want to see, you know, physical athletes performing tricks and things that I never could possibly do. And of course, support the team and, you know, yell and all of that kind of stuff. But somebody like a Megan Rapinoe, as an example, who, you know, thrust herself into the spotlight to try and bring attention to herself just because of her sexual orientation, and looking at things like the NBA players, you know, LeBron James is continually getting into the spotlight. I'm trying to think of somebody else that's like constantly had political commentary and stuff in front of television interviews and things like that. You also have some of the other, like some of the NFL players are doing the same thing. I mean, Colin Kaepernick as an example. What is it that brings these people who admittedly are incredible athletes and can do things that the normal human really is not equipped or able to do? What do you think from your perspective? What do you think these people are thinking? I mean, it's just like, you know, superstars and movie stars and things like that. We're interested in their entertainment value. We're not necessarily interested in their political beliefs and political viewpoints. Do you have any idea? Can you, I don't know, help me to understand a little bit as to why these people would want to bring those types of topics into the sport?
I'm going to guess because of their brand recognition and popularity that they are a magnet for people to listen to, that they're being driven or motivated by either their closest of friends in the quote inner circle or by their agents and telling them things like, oh, well, you should really lend your voice to this cause or this reasoning, thinking because people can relate with that, people know who that person is, versus, say, even politicians. If you talk to most people, they will know who their favorite NBA, NHL, and NFL players are far before they know who their local congressman is, senator is. They have no idea what that person's name even is. But they can quote use the statistics 10 years going back on their favorite sports players. So I'm going to guess for that connective reason, they're being pushed to do that by one of either inner circle, social media, or by agents.
So you think it's more of like trying to gain more popularity to their brand then?
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. It's a way to grow them, get them involved in other things. And the way that I think they make it sound interesting to the athlete is by saying, well, hey, you got this contract with this sports clothing or different type of sponsorship. What if you had these kinds of sponsors as well that could increase your wealth and revenue intake?
All right. All right. So I'm going to ask you, so just last thing, just directly for you, if somebody wanted to get a hold of you or wanted to talk, you know, NHL in particular, do you have any like contact, you know, social media pages, anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I do. I'm on Facebook. You can find me there. You can also contact me via email at voiceovermike@gmail.com. That's another option for them.
Okay. And of course, you want to catch his podcast. How often do you publish your podcast? Do you do it once a week?
Yeah, the podcast is actually published weekly. It ranges, they've ranged from about 18 minutes on the low end to 45 minutes. I try not to capture anybody's attention much longer than that. I realize either the drive is over with or they got so many other things on their mind.
Right, right. And just to give a kind of a brief, again, the topics that you're dealing with here, what was your last podcast about?
So the last podcast was about the preseason coming to a close and the regular season beginning. And it's kind of Montreal Canadian focused, but we talk about all the teams in the NHL. Mainly the main team that's discussed are the Montreal Canadiens, but we'll talk about any trades, any player movements or anything like that. But the last podcast was on the preseason concluding, the regular season starting, all of the rookies that were potentially and announced that we're going to make the starting roster for the Montreal Canadiens on opening night, things like that.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you very much for the short notice drop in here on the Whiskey Musings broadcast. I do appreciate you coming out, and we'll definitely have to talk again really soon. I know we get into a lot of conversations, folks, and it's not just sports related. He has a lot of, in case you haven't noticed, he's an opinionated individual. So thank you very much for coming on the program. I do appreciate it.
Oh, thanks again very much for having me. I know you've got many loyal listeners, so it was a pleasure speaking to them all and have another fantastic episode. Look forward to talking with you soon.
All right. We'll talk to you later. Thank you very much. All right. So we come to the point of the program. And then once again, that was Steve Stiles. He does the Hockey Free for All podcast, which you can find on podcast outlets. I have it on Spotify, but you need to look more into him. And again, he also mentioned that he does voiceover. He is breaking out into the voiceover world, and so that it's, as you can tell, he's got a great radio voice. I've always thought that he should be doing radio and stuff like that. So anyway, and just so you know, I know Steve is probably still there, but I just want to show you a couple of these. So there's my Whiskey Warriors are coming in and saying thank you, and saying, thanks for joining. It was very informative. This is awesome. Thank you very much. Okay, so let me move into let me take a quick break here for just a second. Let's take a breath, take a breather. And I want to tell you that I still have the free shipping option on the Whiskey Musings logoed gear store. And by logo, I also have sayings like this there as well. I've got t-shirts, sweatshirts, all of those things. And you can go to store.whiskeymusings, all lowercase, all one word, .online. That's store.whiskeymusings.online and get free shipping now until Christmas if you use the promo code, all capital letters, Christmas. So type in Christmas, all capital letters, and you will get free shipping from now until Christmas Eve on all of the logoed gear products that are at the store. I actually drained a little bit of it. I probably need to fill up my glass again. Okay. So now we come to that moment of the week, which I think a lot of people like this. I think a lot of people like this little segment. So let me go ahead and I got to make sure I get the right one. And let's go with oh, shoot. Why does it do that? That is so... it goes and it messes up. I don't understand why, but... Nope, wrong one. Shoot. See, technical difficulties, it always does. There we go.
Please
That's
check
the
your
right
mailbox. A new message has arrived.
right, I'm going to check my mailbox. I'm going to check my mailbox for this week's Pet of the Week. And this week's Pet of the Week, let me get rid of that. This week's Pet of the Week submission is from B. Patrick 1369, aka known as Bonnie to all of us. Bonnie has, of course, plenty of animals. She also has a grand dog. Now, I've never heard of this before. I've never heard of having a grand dog. I thankfully don't have children. Well, I take that back. My son is old enough, but thankfully I don't have a grand dog or grand babies, but this is the grand dog. And apparently this is Lady. Now, Lady tries to be a little more like a human than a dog because she absolutely loves her PJs and she loves to wear other clothes. So Bonnie, thank you for sharing Lady with us. Apparently Lady is some sort of a, I'm going to guess, is she like a beagle mix or something like that? I'm going to wait for a second. I think Bonnie might be popping up here. She'll be in the Rumble chat and will let me know. But this is Lady here, and I think she's dancing. And so thank you very much for allowing it. Now understand there is a bit of a delay with the stream. Yes, she is a beagle. I was correct. See, I try to get my breeds correctly. But she is a beagle, and apparently she is very happy to be here, or at least in this picture in her pajamas. I certainly hope they don't get soiled that much, but her pajamas, and she is showing up, and this is really, really nice. Thank you again, Bonnie, for submitting the Pet of the Week. And for those of you that want to submit to the Pet of the Week, you can do so at fans@whiskeymusings.online. That's fans, Foxtrot, Alpha, November, Sierra, at Whiskey Musings, again, all one word, all lowercase, .online. And that was Lady. You can do that for Pet of the Week. You can also submit questions for Whiskey, which, speaking about that, I think I need one for Saturday. So if you have a question for Whiskey, please also send it to fans@whiskeymusings.online. And of course, you can send me, fan mail, hate mail, whatever. I don't care. I mean, I love to hear from my Whiskey Warriors. Believe me, I love to hear from my Whiskey Warriors. So yeah. And once again, that's fans@whiskeymusings.online. Okay. So I saw that NHL thing, and I really wanted to bring that to your attention. In a related article, though, that I also found, and this article also shows up in the Washington Examiner, or is part of the Washington Examiner, and it talks about the physical differences. Whoops. Sorry, lady. Got to get you out of the way there. It talks about the physical differences between males and females. In other words, males, transgender males, and female, actual biological female athletes. Now, this is something that a lot of us on the conservative side have consistently talked about. We have consistently said that there are genetic differences between the two biological sexes, and that these differences are what causes the things like Leah Thomas to be able to be ranked in the mid 400s, and then all of a sudden become transgender and become the number one person in the entire United States, or in the NCAA, as an example. So this study came out, and apparently it showed up in the British Journal of Sports Medicine, that found that transgender women maintain physical advantages in strength and heart and lung capacity years, not just 1 or 2 like they try to tell us, but years after transitioning. Okay. Now, the Brazilian study looked at 15 transgender women. So just to be clear, those are biological males that transitioned over to being, or at least called themselves, a female. 14 female control participants, so those were actual biological females, and 13 biological male control participants. Now, the transgender female participants were an average of 14 years post-transition, and that all had undergone male puberty and all had been taking estrogen long-term. So this study actually answers some of the questions that a lot of us conservatives have had. It's like scientifically, we know, even though a lot in the scientific community are saying, oh, once they've had estrogen for a year, their biological advantages drop off and it becomes closer to more of what a regular biological female would have. Well, this study actually refutes this now. And so it's basically saying that 14 years past the date when they've been taking estrogen the entire time, okay, that four had actually even had their testicles removed, okay, during that. They had undergone what is called a gonadectomy. And apparently the female and male control participants were similar to the transgender participants in age and body mass index. So they tried to take away from the age and body mass and any kind of changes related to what could be somebody who is much more muscular and bigger. And they tried to even things out. And come to find out that muscle strength and cardiopulmonary capacity was measured and found to be that the transgender women performed better than just straight biological women in both regards, meaning their muscle strength and their cardiopulmonary capacity. So honestly, I don't understand where anybody could come off and say that a transgender female and a regular female do not have any advantage or disadvantage in terms of all these little pieces of paper and all of these wonderful things. This study actually shows and demonstrates it. I'm kind of glad that this thing came out because, to be honest, I'm a little irritated at the whole idea. I mean, it's just, you can even just look at their biological makeup, even if they've been taking estrogen and everything else. But this is ridiculous. I mean, I don't know if you remember the stories that have come out by Leah Thomas, which actually this picture is depicting the difference between the two. I mean, look at these physical differences. Now, granted, Leah Thomas is huge in comparison to the women that she competes against. But to sit here and say that a man and a woman can actually compete at the same level is, I think, ludicrous in most cases because of the fact that there are clearly biological advantages in terms of strength, size, even speed. I mean, there's a reason why when I went into the Army that there were two sets of standards, one for males and one for females, because the Army recognized that there was a physical difference between the two. They have, even when you look at like body fat indexes, there are differences between male and female. To just go and in the last 10 years or even less that, we just go and throw all of history and science over many hundreds, if not thousands of years in terms of human development and just throw it out the window just because somebody feels different is literally part of the insanity of the lunatic left. I just got to put that out there. But anyway, there's this article in the show notes in terms of talking about that. And I wanted to bring that up because of the fact that this is part of the whole talk of sports and the NHL. Keep saying NFL, not NHL. It's the NHL. All right. So just like everything else, the White House wants to try and show that they basically are doing something good. And why? Because we have, something like 18 to 20 days. I haven't counted, but we have a short period to the elections coming up. And so because of that short period, they're trying desperately to eliminate all the bad things that are kitchen table issues for most Americans in terms of things like inflation and gas prices and food prices and everything else. Well, I saw this pop in the Washington Examiner, and of course, this thing is just, once again, this is the White House trying to make our misery into a positivity. And this popped, and they apparently, the White House cheers a 5-cent drop in national average gas price. Now, one of the things that you have seen them do on a consistent basis is they have gone and said, hey, gas prices are coming down. And what they would neglect to tell you, just like any other salesperson would do, is they neglect to tell you that, yeah, gas prices dropped in the last month or two or whatever, but they rose by dollars for the 6 to 8 to 12 months before this. And oh, no, it dropped 5 cents. Okay. What they also can't do is they can't do the math where the inflation rate has increased so much. It's at 8.2, 8.3%. Year over year for this year in particular, and 5 cents is going to do nothing for your pocketbook because inflation is well overtaken that 5 cents. It's a mathematical and relatively easy mathematical thing to know that your dollar today is worth a heck of a lot less because of inflation. And so, yeah, 5 cents, woohoo, that's wonderful. But if you look at the average size of a gas tank, let's just say it's 12 gallons, or even 10 gallons. Like I have a couple vehicles that are 9-gallon tanks. You're talking 10 gallons. That's just 50 cents off your total price. That does literally nothing in the grand scheme of things for saving you money and for making it so that Americans and families can sit there and say, yeah, I can take that 50 cents and add it to, something else like my food. But what are you going to buy at the store for 50 cents? You can't even buy a loaf of bread for 50 cents. You can't buy a bottle of milk for 50 cents. You can't even buy a bag of flour for 50 cents. There is literally nothing that you can go to the store and buy for 50 cents that is going to offset or make things even better for the American people. What we really need, Joe and White House folks, is we need to have the gas price get down to when Joe Biden came into office. That's what we need, because the dollars don't make sense, folks. They just don't make sense. And so this is the part that, the White House is completely missing. They cannot do simple math. Well, hey, speaking about gas prices, take a look at this attempt. This is just horrible. You remember that Strategic Petroleum Reserve? And I know that Mark talked about it today on his podcast. I know that Dan Bongino talked about it today. But that Strategic Petroleum Reserve, the SPR, was designed and intended back in the 70s to make sure that we had enough oil to be able to go to war. That's the whole point of the damn thing. All right. Now, what is Joe trying to do? Again, Joe is trying to avoid a slaughter in the midterms. He is trying to make it so that people think that he is actually doing something when, frankly, he's given a big double-barreled, family-friendly middle finger to all of the hardworking Americans ever since he stepped in the Oval Office. Check this out. He has announced, the White House signals even more significant drawdowns from the Strategic Reserve beyond the 180 million oil barrels. Now, I've told you multiple times on this broadcast, first of all, the the strategic petroleum reserves can only pump out roughly 1 million barrels per day. Our average consumption rate on a per day basis is 20 million barrels. So he is basically pumping out on a per day basis only 1/20th of what our average consumption is in today's day and age. This is doing nothing. It's like a drop in the bucket, but it makes people feel good because they don't understand the numbers. They don't understand what I am telling you to be true, which is essentially that this is doing nothing for us. And it's also making us not risk averse, but potential of risk. I can't think of the word, but the potential of risk for us to not have this in a real dire emergency, such as OPEC stopping their sending of oil to us and India stopping selling oil to us. What does Joe Biden think if we were to all of a sudden not be able to import oil at all? We are in such a precarious position at this point. Not only is our reserve going down, but we also don't have the facilities to be able to pull that directly out of our own resources here in the United States. And all this is is a Band-Aid fix. This is to make people believe that he's actually doing something. He's not. He is not doing anything at all with this one bit. He doesn't buy gas. He probably hasn't bought gas himself in a very long time because he's been off on his Delaware, and rich stuff with Hunter Biden paying all of his bills, as we found out based on his laptop and all of these other things. He's just going through life without knowing. And especially now that he's in the White House, he certainly doesn't pay his own bills. He certainly doesn't drive. He's got no idea what the cost of gas actually is or what it means to the American people. And this is essentially a bad idea. And not only that, but the good point here is that Trump tried to fill up the Strategic Petroleum Reserve at a very low barrel rate. And now we're talking $70, $80 per barrel minimum. Sometimes it's gone into the hundreds here recently. And we're going to have to buy all that oil back to restock. Talk about a bad economic decision. Talk about a non-business person's decision. Talk about a non-economical, anybody who honestly runs a family and tries to balance a checkbook or has to balance a checkbook every single month to figure out what bills they can pay and what kinds of food they can get and so on and so forth. He has no idea. He's got no clue. Even if his gaffes and everything else were not showing up and not prevalent to show how he is not all there, this would be an indication to me that he still doesn't know what's going on. And I am appalled, and I'll be honest with you, I'm a little concerned about what's going to happen in the future with this whole scenario. Okay. Now also, let me see here. So we all know that we are in the voting. We're getting down to the wire in terms of the voting. And there have been several polls that have popped out. Yeah. Oh, Bonnie says, we don't want him to drive. You're right. I don't want him to drive either. He's kind of like, when you get older, when you start getting into the, 60s, 70s, 80s range, there's a certain point where you get a little scared behind the wheel when you've got somebody who's behind the wheel of that advanced years, let's say. And so there are times where you need to understand that over time, you're going to lose a little bit of your reflexive response action and your distance, understanding how far you are from things. They tend to fall apart. And so you're right. I wouldn't want that geriatric or close to geriatric. I don't know what they call them, octogenarian or whatever it is. I wouldn't want him behind the wheel of my car. I certainly wouldn't want him there. All right. So we're in the final stretch, honestly, for the midterms. We are in the final stretch. And of course, all of the polls, honestly, are like all over the place. But just to kind of bring it in, Nancy Pelosi apparently doesn't believe or doesn't agree with the polls that are talking about kitchen table issues. And the reason being is because of the fact that, of course, she wants to make abortion the top level issue. And all of the Democrats, honestly, are trying to do that. Even the senator in my state, Senator Patty Murray, consistently tweets about how the Republicans are going to take away abortion. Never mind the fact that, first of all, it never was in the Constitution in the first place. It never should have been a federal law. And secondly, Washington State is run by Democrats. You're never going to see Washington State give up abortion. In fact, I've even said it on multiple shows, actually, that most people within the first trimester, let's even stretch it to the first 15 weeks, most people agree that abortion should be available, safe, and accessible for most people in that first 15 weeks. Where most normal common sense Americans go with it is they say after 15 weeks, which is right about the time that you can actually hear the heartbeat, after 15 weeks, nothing beyond that. And that's where the Democrats are trying to use this bait and switch and use the language to make you think that that Republicans are trying to get rid of abortion completely. Now, that being said, Lindsey Graham, who is a complete moron, went ahead and put in some bill or tried to put in some bill that would ban it at the federal level. You know, honestly, like I've said before, they should keep it off. But the point here is that Pelosi does not agree with polls that show that crime and inflation are top issues. And I'm sorry, but even in Democrats' cities and suburban areas and everything else, we all know that the whole defund the police thing was a problem, that crime has been rising in a lot of these locations. And in fact, believe it or not, this popped from the post-millennial, 81% of Portlanders, that's Portland, Oregon, 81% of Portlanders say that the 2020 riots destroyed the city's image. Well, no, duh. And also, not to mention the fact, but if you've ever seen pictures coming out of places like Seattle or LA or New York or Chicago, where you have tents and all of these places, I mean, I can tell you down in Seattle, they're losing all kinds of tourist money because of the fact that there's needles everywhere. There's drug paraphernalia all over the place. There's homeless people who are begging others. They're crapping on the sidewalk in San Francisco and LA and even Seattle. I've seen photos of it in Seattle. I try and avoid going to Seattle all the time. I don't want to go to Seattle at all. Okay. At all. And so Portland, which seemed to have set the stage for the whole, Black Lives Matter, Antifa, they have all kinds of problems. Well, they're right. 81% of Portlanders are saying that the 2020 riots destroyed the city's image. It used to be a beautiful city. I grew up in that area, and I can tell you that city was gorgeous at times. And nope, I wouldn't go down there. I still have family that's down there. They won't even go down into Portland at all. It just isn't worth it. It's not safe. It just isn't safe to go down there anymore. To go to these cities and be there after dark. It just isn't. Just straight up isn't. So Democrats, they pretty much destroy everything. And of course, moving on. So do you remember back in 2020 where the Democrats kept saying that the Republicans wanted to put in voter laws, and the whole idea of voter ID laws and everything else was nothing but a voter suppression kind of thing? Now, there's been data that's come out for the 2020 election that shows that it was actually one of the most most people have gone and voted more so than any other time in history. They had more voters in 2020 than they had even with Obama, a historic event of electing a first black president. There were numbers that were showing that more people voted in 2020 than had ever done it before. Well, guess what? This midterm, no different, especially in Georgia, where Stacey Abrams has been talking all across, on national television and everything else. She keeps saying and keep talking about how Georgia is putting in Jim Crow laws and Jim Crow 2.0. Well, check this out. This came from the Blaze Media. Biden called Georgian voting law Jim Crow, but data from first day of early voting just upended that narrative. So if the Republicans or anybody in terms of across the states in any of these states were attempting to suppress voting, you would think that you would get lower voter turnout numbers. But what's actually happening, especially in places like Georgia, you're getting higher than normal voter turnouts. You're getting more people to the polls now than what they have in a lot of the past. And the reason being is because, guess what? Everybody knows that our republic, our constitutional republic, and our freedoms are actually on the ballot. They know this. They know this. The American public is not stupid. They know that we need to vote. We need to vote Republican. We need to vote against these leftist ideologues in order to maintain our country, maintain America, and maintain her freedoms. And this is what is going to happen. I'm going to tell you, you're going to see this all across the U.S., especially, I'm going to bet, in all of those swing states that we had so many issues in 2020 that popped up. I'm telling you, you're going to see all of the massive amounts of voting that are going to pop in. Now, we've had a couple representatives who have, let's just say they've shown their true colors. One of them, of course, is Liz Cheney. Liz Cheney has shown Wyomingans, I think that's how it's pronounced, Wyoming, I don't know. Anyway, Wyoming folks, that she deserved to get kicked out. Now, Adam Kinzinger had his district, when they went through the redistricting, he had his district destroyed. So he doesn't even get a chance to come back and try and run again. But what's funny is both of these people, Liz Cheney has been focused on Trump. Adam Kinzinger is focused on conservatives. And this popped in the Political Insider here recently, which I thought this was hilarious. So Adam Kinzinger apparently went to Twitter and responded to a comment regarding Republicans. And Adam Kinzinger openly, now listen to this, openly fantasized about a country being driven towards civil war and suggested that anti-war conservatives would be the first to die. He made the comments in response to a user who went on a mild rant about Republicans not supporting the war effort in Ukraine, referring to them as fascists and labeling them as the GQP party, and that the fake Republican from Illinois, Adam Kinzinger, had to elevate a Twitter troll by sharing his message, is a good indicator of where Adam Kinzinger's mindset is of late. And he basically responded. You can see the Twitter, the tweet, here on the broadcast. Go over to rumble.com /C/whiskey_musings_broadcast. Sign up, subscribe, but you'll see it in the video here where it talks about truer words. This is Adam Kinzinger saying truer words have never been spoken. Spoiled people who have never seen war like to play dress up. If there is a civil war, they will be the first to pass away because Walgreens will run out of heart medicine. First of all, you need to understand, I don't think most people have necessarily a problem about the Ukraine war. What they have a problem with is the fact that we as America cannot afford to keep funding the war in Ukraine. And we keep printing money and spending money when we are in the highest inflation since the 80s. And we just continually print money and feed money to Ukraine. There's also questions as to whether or not Joe Biden and Hunter Biden have been making money off of money laundering in Ukraine and places in Ukraine. There's evidence anecdotal data coming out of the Hunter Biden laptop that suggests that they have business interests over in Ukraine. Joe Biden himself got the prosecutor fired in Ukraine because the prosecutor was looking into his son and the board that his son was on. Quid pro quo Joe got that name because he wanted to get the man fired and withheld or threatened to withhold American funding to make that happen. So why isn't Adam Kinzinger looking into that? Rather than talking about whether or not certain people, conservatives in particular, are going to be the first to die in a civil war. This is not, thank God he is gone. Not that I want to use the man's, use God's name in vain, but I'm just so glad that this guy really has no path to come back, that he is out. And I would certainly hope that the people in his state do not go anywhere near him again to try and vote him in. He just needs to fade away in what I call political and historical obscurity. He just needs to go away completely. All right. So let me see. What else do I have that I haven't talked about yet? There's that. But let me see what else. Oh, yep. Okay. So further information has come out. Let me just bring this up. This will be the last article that I talk about. But further information has come out that apparently the White House has applied pressure to people along the border, in particular an El Paso mayor, to try and avoid this whole idea of declaring emergencies because of all of these people that are being just waltzed across our southern border. They're allowing them to come across. We have such an illegal immigration problem, and this is a huge, huge hit to the White House, to the Biden administration, and honestly, in particular, to Kamala Harris. I mean, Kamala Harris is the quote-unquote border czar, and she has yet to physically actually go to the border. I mean, she can go to the border of Korea, but she can't go to our own border and take a look at things. And so the funny thing about this, and this is a Newsmax article that popped, and the White House apparently is reportedly pressured the El Paso mayor not to declare a migrant emergency, according to a report that was released. And let me see if I can find it here. Okay, so the council member, Claudia Rodriguez, told the Post, I'm assuming that's the Washington Post, but told the Post that apparently Mayor Oscar Leeser told her that the White House asked him to not declare an emergency, despite at least 3 of 8 city council members urging him to do so. Now, these border towns that a lot of people don't understand, these border towns, Eric Adams up in New York complains about the influx of migrants that Greg Abbott and the super governor Ron DeSantis out of Florida have been sending to all of these cities, to these liberal cities. They're complaining about the fact that they can't support these folks. And what's really funny is, in case you haven't noticed, Project Veritas actually had a undercover camera where a high-ranking official within Eric Adams' administration admitted to the fact that Eric Adams was ill-equipped to handle this. But the point is that they keep trying to push this to the border. Now, why would they want to do that? Why would they want to keep these migrants at the border? Honestly, the way they do that is to keep them out of sight from the public. They cannot allow the American public to think that we are essentially suffering from an invasion from the southern border. They cannot allow this. And so because they cannot allow this, okay, they have to do things like talk to a mayor in El Paso, Texas, who was also a Democrat, to not declare a state of emergency. Because if news like that comes out, then you would have negative press. And that's what they're looking for. You know, the press is really good at suppressing stuff. They showed us this in terms of the Hunter Biden laptop story. How many other stories are they suppressing to keep out of the media? This is why outlets like Newsmax and OAN and some of these alternative sources, RBSN, podcasts like Dan Bongino, and shows like the Mark Kaye Show, and even me, we all try to bring to light the things that the mainstream media are all trying to hide. And so this is a big one. I mean, I can't even imagine somebody calling up. This is no different than you know, the stuff that they accuse Trump of in calling Ukraine and saying, hey, we're going to take care of you, but by the way, do us a favor. And they blame Trump for that quid pro quo. It's not that he was trying to hold back any funding or anything for Ukraine, but he was basically saying, hey, you know what? We're doing this for you. Do you think you could do me a favor and just like take a look at this? Try and help us root out the criminals in your country. And here, Joe Biden is looking at the Democrat mayor of El Paso and saying, hey, just like he did with OPEC, by the way, hey, we need you to tone it down a little bit, you know? And with OPEC, he was saying, hey, can you not cut production until after the midterms so that we have a nice, we have a nice story to tell, that we don't have negative press? These people are all about wheeling and dealing. They're all about image. They're all about what things look like and appear to be, not the actual truth. Okay? Not the actual truth. So, that being said, that is my final Whiskey Musings thought of the evening. Do me a favor, if this is your first night here, first time here, go over onto Rumble, sign up for a free account, subscribe. I'm at 287 right now. I'd like to hit 300. Phone going off. That's not good. I'd like to hit 300 soon. And that would be awesome. Please go over and subscribe. Also, I want to give a great big shout out to Steve. Thank you very much for being on the program, and go check out his podcast. Even, if you have any kind of an inkling to understand the NHL and some of the things that are happening in the NHL, I highly recommend his podcast. Support him over there, and just subscribe on his outlets. Like I said, I have him on Spotify, so you can go over to Spotify and sign up for that. Also, let's see, support TGRN. That would be great. I do appreciate that. And coming up, as I've kind of alluded to, as a quick reminder, I do my broadcast on Saturday night at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. I do Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Oh, I have my Halloween special coming up the Saturday before Halloween, and I have Mark Kaye from the Mark Kaye Show here for an interview on November 2nd. Mark that one in your calendars, and we will see you next time on the Whiskey Musings broadcast. Good night, everybody.